Stephen Beschloss. I'm here with Katie Phang, and you probably already know Katie, and you know her as an excellent, brilliant legal analyst, somebody who's been important in terms of her work on MSNBC in particular, and the show that she's had, the Katie Phang Show on MSNBC. And I want to say that I'm really a fan, and I'm a fan not only because I think that your analysis has been smart and important, but I also am a fan because I found maybe more than almost anybody else, you were somebody who felt like you had to tell the truth, that you were going to say what you think on the daily, and that's not so common.
It's not that easy to do when you're operating within the confines of mainstream media. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you. I truly believe that we are building a community here at Substack. And what I love is there's a little bit of everything for everyone. And people's consumption of information comes in different ways. Some people love to listen, some people love to read. It just depends. And what I love about Substack is it kind of tickles your fancy if you're into different things. And I think, especially for me, though, I have compared this to a daily journaling moment. Substack is my home. It is the place where I consider my day to start and end. I not only do the Substack lives with great people like you and others, but I also write pieces. And, writing has never been my strongest suit, but it is a place for me to take my thoughts and reduce them into writing. And the cool thing is, anybody can do it. You don't
Yeah.
have to be a quote unquote accomplished writer or author. And so if I feel motivated or I feel inspired, I do it, or I drop a quick little video that I call the Fang Files, and I'll just, drop a little video about something that has happened. And I'm still putting pictures of my rescue dog, Lucky, or, it's just a really cool place to
Right.
be. And I think it does speak to the bigger picture of authenticity and the opportunity to be who you are in every way in independent media versus maybe feeling like you have to only be in a certain lane when you're in mainstream media because you're
Right.
only satisfying a certain maybe genre or group of people. In this instance, I'm just kind of, hey, I'm letting
Doing
it
your
all
thing.
hang out.
Doing your thing. Look, I have to say, I mean, I've published. I mean, I've been doing this now for over 4 years. I've published over 900 essays. It's crazy. I love to write. I write a lot. I do. I
And you're
do.
very
Uh,
good at it, which is
well,
why I
thank you very
say
much.
I am not the
Well,
writer.
you're kind to say it, but the thing about all of that writing is that I thought about if I had to rely on an editor who say to me, yes or no, this idea, not that idea, and so on. I mean, maybe a quarter of them I would have published, and I've published all major sort of places. But I know how much time you spend going back and forth with an editor and going over the idea and so forth. This way, I make up an idea. I say this is the one I want to do, and 3 hours later there it is, and some hours after that it's available for everybody. So this system of this has been fantastic, and I think one of the important things I think we need to talk about is the sort of role of legacy media and the role of independent media. I've got a lot of other things I want to ask you about, but I think this is maybe at the heart of this moment, which is the need to be, I mean, you've described yourself as a truth teller, the need to be honest, the need to use honest, vivid language that articulates the truth of what this moment requires. And honestly, the way in which much of legacy media has failed to recognize, I think, first, and then act on this moment. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your sense of freedom or constraint, when you were sort of operating at MSNBC or elsewhere versus sort of the way that you can operate now.
Well, Stephen, clearly you are the writer because you called it in such an elegant way, honest and vivid language. I think my husband just says that it's just flat out profanity, but that's just what I do. And I have been saying time and time again to not only those that I've been, following and that are following me, we have to meet the urgency of the moment. With the urgency of our messaging, or flip it around, either way, right? And that urgency means that we have to be swift. We have to respond quickly, but we have to respond with, I think, the appropriate level of urgency and exigency and emphasis. There is a reason why I'm so particularly passionate about the destruction of norms and institutions when it comes to our judicial system. You know, I grew up as a lawyer. I did not grow up as a journalist, and to see what's happening makes me upset and angry because there are a whole kind of group of people I call the enablers, which are the lawyers for Trump and civil and criminal and private and government. And as a fellow lawyer, I get upset when I see that. And so I want to be able to articulate it. And sometimes it comes out with, it's a shit show, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are things that just have to be appropriately descriptive. And so it really isn't just the language. I think that was some type of constraint at mainstream media. It's also, I talk about how just there's a logistical constraint, which is you only get an hour to do a
Mhm.
show for me, specifically for the Katie Phang show. And there was only 40 something minutes of TV talk time. And so you literally were just trying to race against time and the clock. And I I always felt like people were tuning in not to listen to me, but to listen to my guests.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to pay them the honor that they were due, to let them talk and spread their wisdom and share their thoughts. And I also wanted to listen and do follow-up and not have canned questions that were prepared in advance to ask these guests. And then the next thing you know is you've only been able to maybe talk about a couple of things and your time is up.
Yeah.
And I felt like
Yeah.
there were so many unanswered components to that conversation. But then I had to kind of lather, rinse, repeat, and I wasn't having the chance to follow up because there would be more news that would be going on during the week. The other thing I felt was really important was I didn't want to hash over stuff that you had already heard before from either the same voices, the same pundits, again, the same talking class. I didn't want to do that. I wanted you to hear from new people that from whom maybe you'd never seen or heard from, but they really were top of class. They were the best in their areas. And they also brought a different perspective than perhaps one that you were hearing all damn week long on
Mhm.
MSNBC. That I thought was a really important thing for me to do. And
What was it a
so
struggle to be able to create the space to do it? I mean, obviously, there's the pressure to do the story that everybody else is doing and do it in a particular way, and to move through the segments with speed, not linger too long. So, how hard was it? I mean, was it a battle for you, or
it was hard simply because there were important things that had to be covered, especially because notoriously there's a Friday night news dump or something that happens on a Friday. My show was on a Saturday, but I was very intentional as well about making sure that I lifted AANHPI, Asian American, Native, Pacific Islander voices. I really wanted to be able to do that. And so I was very conscientious about also carving out space in my show to give the issues that were very particular to my community and to also have other voices. Why? Because I found the following. I found that when you were booking these shows, that there were kind of the go-to people that you would always see, and some of them are my friends, and I used them and I continue to speak with them. Like Joyce Vance is one of my best friends because she's the best of the
right?
best when it comes to the law. um, but then there were other people that if you were like, hey, who should we be talking to about this? I found, Stephen, that 99% of the time it wasn't an Asian person, it wasn't a black person, it wasn't a Hispanic person, and I'm thinking to myself, that's just not possible.
Yeah,
That is just not possible.
right.
Why is it that we're not seeing them and hearing from them? What a freaking disservice that is to our viewers, not only from a representation standpoint, from a just point of life standpoint.
Yeah,
I haven't walked in their shoes. I don't even know how to experience and articulate that to people. And so I was trying to make sure that I achieved that level of perspective that was honest about the issue, and about who I am. And so sometimes it also knocked heads with people internally because, I called Donald Trump the convicted felon Donald Trump time
yeah.
and time again. And every once in a while I
Gee,
hear,
it
well, why do you
happens
have
to
to
be
call him that?
actually true.
Well, because it's true. So it was little things like that were kind of head scratchers. But I will say this, Stephen, a lot of people don't know. Um, when they canceled my show at MSNBC, I was still in the midst of a contract, and I had about 9 months left on my contract, almost 10. And I chose to leave. I chose to leave the network because I thought it was a disservice to me as a person, knowing who I am, and also to the fight, the pro democracy fight. that I sit on the sidelines for 10 months,
Yeah.
and not have access to all of you to have these conversations that are so important for us to have. And so I said, I'm going to leave. And it was very fast.
Mm,
And I've shared with people on my Substack. It's been a little scary to have to
sure.
go into this new space, but
A whole
everybody's been
different kind
so
of learning.
welcoming. Yeah, it's a different learning curve. But everybody like you and others have been so welcoming. And so I'm really grateful that you've given me this place to be able to hang out with you guys.
Well, if I was wearing a hat, I would tip it to you. The truth is, it's hard to make that kind of a decision, and I think everyone who's listening appreciates that you made the decision because, again, you can talk about it as a lawyer, you can talk about it as a journalist, you can talk about it as being part of the media and the routines and the responsibilities that go along with it. But every one of us right now is in this moment where we need to think about and we need to sort out for ourselves how can we be meaningful participants in this moment so that we can have some role in resisting and opposing and pushing it back against this, I think, fascist regime that's trying to end our democracy and dismantle the history of our liberal government that has created a better life for millions and millions of people, not only in America but around the world. And so, this is I believe this is our moment, this generation's moment and responsibility to decide, as Americans, what is it that you want to do? How is it that you're going to contribute and to make a decision? So, if I can put it in all that, large context, the decision not to just hang around the network, but get in the fight, if you will, now by doing what you're doing. I mean, I commend you because it's what we all need to do and engage as much as we can every day. I think it's just our responsibility. And I know it's very hard for people. I mean, I hear a lot from subscribers, and I even have subscribers, paid subscribers that will unsubscribe. It's always
Yeah.
painful. But when they do it, oftentimes I'll get a note, which was, I love your work, but I just can't be involved anymore. I just need a break. I need to be away from all of this. And gee, maybe in a month or two I'll be back. And so I understand people are experiencing a lot of stress and distress and in some cases despair and in some cases, genuine doubt about how they can contribute. But that's why, this effort I think is so important. So let me just put all that sort of on the table. I mean, I think this is an urgent moment. And that brings me to, if I might, the Jake Tapper book,
Mm.
Original Sin, about Joe Biden, and which I'm appalled by the assumption that we need to be focusing on the cognitive ability or inability of Joe Biden right now, rather than, I think, the far more dangerous, serious cognitive derangement of Donald Trump. And so I think it's a terrible disservice not only to Joe Biden and the reality of him being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, but it's a terrible disservice to the country because it's, in my view, nothing more than a distraction. What do you think?
So I posted on Saturday on my social media platforms, including Substack, that we needed to stop talking about Joe Biden and that we needed to talk about the, 34 convicted felonies, guy who I think is trespassing in the Oval Office. This was obviously before the announcement on Sunday of Joe Biden's diagnosis, which, as I was telling my good friend Norm Eisen at The Contrarian, I am not personal friends with Joe Biden. And yet, when I heard that news, I felt like I was his friend and that I'd heard horrible news, which I think just speaks to the type of man that Joe Biden is, that he would touch my life in a way where I would feel such a visceral reaction to the news. And I think what you just said is so important about keeping perspective and context about what we're going through right now. Why are we talking about Joe Biden? Which, listen, yes, we should talk about the medical news of him having been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Sure.
But I don't see more of, and we should. I don't see more news reporting about Donald Trump saying that Joe Biden has stage 9 cancer. So I hear stuff like that from Donald Trump, which he said twice.
Yep.
And
Right. It wasn't
And
just a slip
how
of the tongue.
it wasn't just a listen, you and I speak publicly often. Sometimes it's a little blip. I may mispronounce a word, I may mispronounce a name, I may, maybe transpose a number. He said stage 9 twice. That should be glaring headline across all news that the president of the United States doesn't know that there is no such thing as stage 9 cancer. Um, that is what bothers me about mainstream media. Where's the follow up? Where's the pushback? Where is the challenging of that? I don't need you. I don't expect Fox News to do it. I don't expect Newsmax to do it or OAN or whatever, right?
Right.
I don't expect them to do that, Stephen, but I do expect there to be some measure of context about let's talk about the news part of Joe Biden, but why are we talking about things that are last year? Now, that being said, I am not suggesting to anybody that we're not introspective or we don't do an appropriately honest postmortem about what happened in November of 2024. But as far as I'm concerned, let's learn from that and move forward. Now, if
Yeah.
that means, Stephen, that we need to rest from the clutches of some type of group of people that are currently controlling the levers of power when it comes to the Democratic Party and dictating what's going to happen, then let's do that, folks. Let's wrest control from those people that are probably sitting very comfortably, making a lot of money and not wanting to disrupt status quo. But if you are going to frame it in terms of Biden's competency, I don't need to have a
Yeah.
conversation with you. And I don't want
Yeah.
to read your shit. And I don't want to talk about it because it doesn't have anything to do with why we are where we are now.
Right.
You
Right.
cannot lay blame at the feet of Joe Biden for the loss in November of 2024. And that is the way that these books and these exposés are being, done. And I won't give it oxygen. I think we need to just move the hell on.
Yeah, and look, I think what gets lost in it is, there were 4 years of an administration that was remarkably, historically significant and successful in all
Amazing.
kinds of ways, that was focused on trying to make life better for Americans, and that understood the power of government to improve people's lives, and in all the ways that we can articulate that. And that conversation gets lost when we think the important question is whether or not he was stuttering, or he was somehow stumbling at a particular moment in time. And even if, dare I say, I mean, we can go through a whole history of presidents who have had moments where they needed supportive staff to be able to conduct their jobs. I mean, these things do happen. For me, what makes it so appalling is the focus with such great intensity on Joe Biden, and the utter inability to focus on Donald Trump for his own derangement. And we can talk about all of his sort of psychological failings and what seems to be the accelerating cognitive decline. And I think it's discernible and provable, and possible to document. But I'm back to Jake Tapper for just one more minute, and then we should move on. But because he sort of represents this attitude from the legacy media, which is that what he focuses on is okay, to use his energy to focus on the failings of Biden, even while he seems to be soft pedaling Trump. And I want to just read a quote from him when he was asked by NPR on the public's lack of trust in legacy media. And he acknowledges the news media is in a crisis. And then he says, one of the reasons they don't trust us is what just happened with Joe Biden and his acuity, and the fact that we in the media were pretty late to the story. Well, no, the issue isn't that. The issue has been the bias that made it possible for the focus to linger on Joe Biden and to ignore the obvious failings of Trump.
I my disappointment comes from the reality, and I'll speak for it from the lens of having been in cable news for some years. Um, Somebody like Jake Tapper has a platform of multiple days a week where he has the ability, whether at the end of the day they're actually reaching the number of viewers that they used to. I don't think they are, but when you're given the privilege of that platform, why would you abuse the privilege of that platform by wasting the space which you could use to better the knowledge base of people and to make us all better informed voters and citizens
right,
and just denizens, right? Why would you do that? Why would you think that, that you have to give somebody like Scott Jennings, no offense, Scott Jennings is a reason why I would not watch CNN,
right.
right? It's platforming people under the guise of, well, it's good TV, or platforming people under the guise of, well, we're going to let the other side have access because we have to show that we're open minded people. The answer is no. I mean, to be clear, Trump World had an edict that my show and Nicole Wallace's show that nobody could go on our shows,
Yeah,
period. Because they knew that Nicole and I would be prepared. They knew that we would push back, right? And so but that is the reason why you didn't see certain people on my show because it was, I thought, intellectually dishonest from a journalist standpoint to say, well, I'm going to be giving this kind of equal space to be able to hear from the other side. None of my viewers, and frankly, Americans don't need to hear a lie
yeah,
because the amount of work you have to do to then dispel that lie when they have been given free access to people because they're on cable news or mainstream media, and then they get that imprimatur, Stephen, of legitimacy or credibility because they've been given this access. What a freaking disservice. And so for me, I think about the effort it takes to have to now explain. Perfect example is the Christy Noam today lying about not knowing, lying about her definition of habeas corpus today, right?
right.
And she says it's a lie. It's not accurate. It's not true. And of course, it's what Trump wants her to say. But the amount of effort's now going to have to take Stephen to have to explain what habeas corpus really
Right.
is a lot. So I understand the context of that was a congressional hearing, right? I get it. But
Well,
don't have somebody like that on your show though, or don't sit there and propagate stuff that's not helpful in that way.
right. I mean, there have been people, and just to give background on that, there's been a series of people, including Stephen Miller, who've said that they are interested in suspending habeas corpus so that they're no longer required to provide a legal hearing or trial, any kind of a opportunity for in this specific case migrants before deporting them. And there have been times in history where that has happened. And including during the Civil War, including during Reconstruction. After that, when the KKK was murdering many thousands of black voters and black legislators, and lacking the ability to for those for the KKK to be properly tried because they were getting support from their own white community. And so, in that case, a U.S. grant, and to give a little history lesson, U.S. grant at that point suspended with the support of Congress habeas corpus, so he could bring those people and pull them out of the terrorism that they were engaging in across the country. But here's the thing, um, it's the same point. Somebody like Kristi Noem can repeat over and over that Donald Trump has the right to do it without congressional approval, and repeats it enough and is given the space to do it. And here we are, we're left with an ill-informed citizenry that's convinced that these are leaders that know what they're saying. So we have a problem with a public that is increasingly ill-informed, which is the reason we're in all this.
Which is why, in conjunction with Persist Network, which is a group of Women for Harris and other like-minded allies and advocates, um, which is why, in conjunction with them, we've launched what I'm calling "Wait a Damn Minute" with Katie Phang. And so we started it last week, and it was an idea that I had because I saw how absolutely absurd it was watching Caroline Levitt at the White House podium, just basically spewing lies unchecked. She's selectively calling on members of the far right media. There's no pushback from mainstream. So, what we do is every day we do a 60-second, we do a 1-minute video that kind of takes one or two kind of major lies or
Mm,
misrepresentations that have been made by the administration, and we tell the truth, we tell the facts. And I say I'm the shadow press secretary. I felt like it was really important for us to have a shadow
fantastic.
cabinet in that way and a shadow press secretary where if you want to know about, Trump calls it the big beautiful bill, but it's not. It's a big betrayal of American people, and I go through the statistics and I go through the numbers, and hopefully and it's definitely catching steam. So I'm grateful for people that are watching and sharing it. And it's important because I want somebody in this attention economy to be able to say, I can get my 60 seconds from Katie and be able to share that information. Like when I was covering the Trump trial last year, I did a 60-second breakdown of every single day of that trial. And so if you missed the trial that day, or if you couldn't follow along on social, you could listen and you could understand what happened. And so it's a lift. I mean, it's something that I'm producing with some folks every single day except
Right.
for
And
Sunday.
where are you distributing it?
It's all over my social for free. I put it on
Yeah.
Substack as a post. I put it on Blue Sky and Instagram and TikTok and Threads and anywhere that I can plop it, including the cesspool of X, just to put it out there so people can say there is a reliable source of information where I can go and I can get a data point, and maybe sometimes that'll convince one person when they see that it's 880, billion at stake, or whatever, right? Like they need to know the facts. And so that's the reason why I thought it was important to do wait a damn minute.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, I think this it's needed. I think that we need a number of voices, including yours, to be able to do that. Again, to be able to allow people to know what's the difference between right and wrong, true and false, and that's
True.
the danger we're in right this moment, which is people being degraded in their ability to know what's true and what's not true. So that's why the need to be able to in a way to do the fact checking, but to do it in a way that people can absorb it and get it and use it. So let me ask you. Sadly, one of my favorite topics is the emoluments clause these days.
Ah,
And you as somebody who has an awfully good sense about law and ethics, it seems to me that it's worth taking a minute to talk about this $400
I'm
million
glad.
bribe, call it a gift if you wish, from Qatari of a jumbo jet, which is surely a foreign gift from a foreign state, which the emoluments clause specifically says
Can't happen.
disallows foreign gifts from a king or a prince or a foreign state. It seems like there seems to be some political pushback, and even among some Republicans. But my question for you is, whatever happened to the law?
It went by the way of a ultra conservative Supreme Court that said, presidents are kings. No, listen, I am very proud of the work that I'm doing with Norm Eisen at State Democracy Defenders and the Contrarian. One of the things that was the siren song for me to leave MSNBC was the opportunity to take my legal training and experience and to go back to court. So not only am I here in independent media with you and others, and also on YouTube with the guys from the Midas Touch Network. But I'm working with Norm Eisen, and we're going to court and we're fighting in court against this administration. And we are specifically looking at emoluments clause violations. As you'll recall, Stephen, that was an issue back in Trump term one.
Yeah,
Trump 1.0, there were at least two lawsuits that were based on violations of the emoluments clause of the United States Constitution. Those cases were found by courts. They found that those were violations, and then they made their way all the way up to the Supreme Court. But then, because Trump won, those cases went by the wayside. And so, um, at this point, I think it's important for people to know that there are folks like Norm and the Contrarian, State Democracy Defenders, and other amazing organizations that are listening to the American people and
yeah,
saying, you know what, somebody has to take up the fight and somebody has to take up the mantle of these fights. And where are we seeing a lot of movement? It's in courts.
yeah,
Judges, including Republican judges, are saying this is the law and we're not going to tolerate violations of it. And so when it comes to the emoluments clause, we're all looking at a $400 million plane that is parked in Palm Beach, next close to close to Mar-a-Lago, so Trump can kick the tires on his plane. We're looking at things like Trump cryptocurrency issues,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean, there's
yeah,
a lot of stuff there. And the bottom line is who's the beneficiary of this? It's not you and I. It's not everybody else who's tuning in right now. It's Donald Trump. And
yeah.
the grift has been very real. We've seen the implications of it in a very real sense. And so I'm very, very proud to say that we're keeping our eye on it and, be on the lookout for some stuff.
Yeah, look, I mean, Donald Trump goes to the Middle East with the idea that finally he's going to get the respect that he wants, and he surely is being exploited by the people that he met. And it's important to note it's that $400 million bribe from Qatari. There's also a $1 billion hotel that's being built in Dubai with $20 million apartments that will accrue to the Trump family. There's also as you mentioned, the sort of cryptocurrency business, the world, what is it called? The world something financial, and that whole operation was given $2 billion by the Abu Dhabi government. So this is all about cashing in by Trump and the Trump family, and I think it's important for people to notice it, and I'm hoping that again in the whole set of reasons why the public should be responding with outrage first, but then with increasing kind of commitment to joining together to try to do something about this. The political side of this. I mean, it's important that the lawyers, it's important that the judges are in on trying to push back against the worst violations. But I do think it's going to take millions of Americans who are ready not just every once in a while, but honestly on the daily, who are willing to take to the streets and over time to really begin to identify what is the issue or two or three that they demand redress that's going to begin to force change from this administration.
Yeah, and I want to underscore something about that. I've been very adamant about underscoring that people's version of what constitutes resistance for them is different, and so to each your own, to each his own or her own. Meaning, if you don't want to go out in the street and protest or go to a rally, that's okay. Find the form of resistance that is comfortable for you, that you feel like is something that you want to commit yourself to. Maybe it's a book club or a coffee club or a wine club, or something where you get together and you talk and you give yourself space and create your own community to be able to not only, I think, cathartically talk through these things, because sometimes
Yeah,
it's important to just be able to talk about it with somebody who's like-minded, but maybe take that energy and then maybe it galvanizes you to bring in somebody else and talk about it with someone else, or maybe you get an idea from someone else to do something else. I mean, I just feel like we all need to realize that we have to stop waiting for DC to save us. DC is
yeah,
not going to save us.
yeah.
There are people that are fighting the good fight there, Stephen, but we can't wait for DC to make this better for us. We have to do it for ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves right now, and that means leaning into each other as a sense of community, whether it's here in Substack or even in your own backyard. I'm a big believer of that. And so I want to tell everybody who's tuning in, it is a no pressure experience. We get so much pressure already from externally.
Yeah,
And so I want people to know that don't feel pressure to have to go and do something in the streets if that's not your jam.
yeah.
Find what works for you and know that you are making a difference. People need to know that even the smallest act can have a ripple effect, and we don't even know it sometimes. So just keep that in mind, folks. Please, please keep that in mind.
I'm with you. And look, we need acts of kindness. A simple act of kindness on any given day it's weird to call it an act of resistance, but it is. To be able to spread kindness and decency at this time, to model compassion. These things are critical because they're so. I mean, they're critical always, but they're so much an expression. Response to a regime that focuses on hate and cruelty
Yeah,
and fear and violence. And
I
so all
agree.
these things are important. I do want to still give a focus on this idea of 12 million people in the streets,
Oh,
whether
yeah.
among this group or whether it's others. That 12 million, it's the number from Erica Chenoweth, a Harvard researcher who's done a lot of research on political change movements around the world and has found that if you have 3.5% of a population, that starts to be the number that you need to be able to drive change, and where they come together with a clear message and a clear goal that's directed towards a government that's asking, demanding change. And 3.5% in the American context is 12 million people. So it's something to look forward to. I think where we need to get to, and I'm hoping that this collection of outrages doesn't just burn people out, doesn't make them just feel like I can't take it anymore and I'm out, but hopefully helps people to clarify what's most important for them and focus on that issue. Like you said, maybe it's books and the banning of books and being part of a library group, or maybe it's helping a group that's helping migrants and working with other vulnerable populations, whatever it may be. But to your point, do something.
Yeah, and there is no corner of America right now, Stephen, that you could go and hide from the negative impacts of this administration. And we are seeing that, for example, in my own local community of South Florida, with the Supreme Court sustaining the termination of temporary protected status for Venezuelans and others. And I mean, we need to remember too this GOP budget bill impact on Medicaid, SNAP, and other benefits. It's going to impact a lot of people in very harsh ways. And so if you know that people need help, um, that's one of the things that we're going to do that's going to actually help heal us while we're going through a lot of
Mm,
this very kind of, I'm still trying to pick myself up from November of 2024, right? Like, I'm
sure,
honest. And so I
sure,
do think that we need to be looking out for each other. I think that's when those are the bonds that get created that help us be stronger together, and that helps us move forward together. And I think those are the bonds that are incredibly influential, because I think people then realize that we really are in this together. And so we will vote in a like-minded way to benefit each other, right?
yeah.
I mean, we have to remind ourselves there's more of us than there are of them,
There's a
flat
lot
out.
more after all, and even amongst the almost 90 million people who chose not to vote in 2024, who were eligible to vote, I surely don't think the majority of them were looking for an outcome like we're currently facing. So let me kind of wrap up in terms of this. There's a this there. I honestly think these are very dark times. I think there have been far darker times in our history, but this is surely a dark and stressing moment for all of us, for many of us, and all of us maybe in some ways the same way, and in some ways very different ways. Are you optimistic looking forward? Are you looking ahead and thinking, we're going to find our way through this? Or are you at this point genuinely worried about if we're going to find a way through?
I'm worried, but not about our inability to move forward. I'm worried because I think there's a lot about which we're not even aware, because it's being hidden from us and hidden from the American public. I'm just a realist that way. I'm a lawyer, right?
Yeah,
My job as a lawyer is to manage expectations. So I'm never going to sit here and lie to anybody or blow smoke up their ass about whether or not something's going to be 100%, fantastic or whatever. But what gives me hope, Stephen, is this. You and I are having this conversation right now with more than 2,000 people that are tuned in right now. I have said time and time again, when people like Joyce Vance and Mary Trump and E. Jean Carroll, who are three of my closest friends, when folks like Jasmine Crockett, who's also one of my closest friends, when I see people like that are saying, I'm here, I'm in the fight, I'm not going anywhere, I know we're going to be okay.
yeah,
You get worried when we say, we're checking out, which is why, getting back to the beginning of our conversation, right? I said, I'm not sitting on the sidelines for this fight. I have a
yeah,
10-year-old daughter, and I'm not going to look her in the face when she asks me, well, what were you doing when it mattered the most? I'm not going to tell her that I sat there and said, you know what, I'll just sit this one out and I'll just hang out and figure something out. That's not the cloth from which I am cut. But more importantly, that is not the America I want to see. And so there are some concepts that I think, have always kind of maybe read about in a textbook. democracy being one of them. And we
Yeah.
probably never really realized how valuable that that belief system, that government system, that how valuable it was until we've seen the peril that democracy is finding itself in right now. And I think that that's why people are stepping up, and they're not going to be counted out on this one. And which is why, if it's 12 million, then we'll get to 12 million, my
Yeah.
friend, if that's what it
Yeah.
takes. And in the meantime, we'll just keep on lifting each other up and figuring our way through it and powering our way through it.
We have to let's look to the judges who are doing the right thing. Let's look to lawyers and legal groups that are not capitulating and are pursuing lawsuits and other ways to push back. Let's look at political leaders. J.B. Pritzker and Murphy and Crockett and a whole bunch of others that have been important voices in this period. But let's look to each other, as you're saying. I mean, there's going to be some. Timothy Snyder, the historian of
Yes.
tyranny, has said, we might be looking at some kind of, his words, exogenous surprise in the next 100 days, which is to say, maybe it's some kind of terrorist event that they pursue as a way to justify further suppression. If something like that comes, his point, and it would be my point too, be calm, be active, and be together. And know that we're still able to look at things clearly and to be able to get through this.
Yes, 100%.
So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
participating in this conversation, which I hope is of value to all the people here. And look, we're going to find a way through this, but I think it's conversations like this that help. So thank
Well, I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you again for inviting me into your space to be able to be with you. I appreciate it greatly. And to everybody who's
Thank
tuning
you.
in, you guys are fantastic. And thanks for welcoming me as
Yeah,
well.
we'll see. See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.